everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Dungeons and Tangents. Dungeons and Tangents.
We'll get it eventually.
So this episode, we're talking about maps.
Maps. I've got some notes.
Yeah.
I think we both have the same notes, but yeah, some maps. We were going to talk about minis.
I love minis.
Erik made the excellent point that we should probably talk about maps beforehand because maps are an integral part of using minis.
I love minis.
In tabletop experience. So they're not bound to just minis. There's a lot of different uses for maps in gaming. A lot of people use them. A surprising number of people don't. I think they add a lot to the experience.
The first experience I had with D&D, there was no map. This was in middle school. The DM describing the situation and us asking questions about, okay, am I this close to that tree that the monkey's in? Can I shoot it? And him saying yes or no.
So when you say no map, you're referring to a map to facilitate a tactical experience.
Yeah.
Right, for that specific encounter.
For anything. I mean,
which keys directly into what we're talking about, those being necessary for the most part for minis.
I love minis.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of uses for maps.
There are.
General area, overland, worldwide geography of whatever world you're playing in to give you that sense of engagement. And we come around to this every single episode. Engagement, immersion, interaction with the world that you're trying to build.
Yeah. And believability.
Yes, and giving somebody a feeling like they're aware of how things fit together on a grand scale goes a long way towards establishing that shared narrative with that entire group.
And I remember feeling it was jarring to begin with that first game. I mean, it was jarring because of the first time I played D&D, but it was jarring to have to experience something completely within my imagination with a person narrating a description of the town that we were in, and then the trail we were on, and then the forest we were in, and then the cave we were in. And so he had to describe all of it, and I remember it now, and I have a very clear picture in my mind of it. But if he had a map, I feel like it would have been a very quick, just you're here on the map.
My first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, there were overall overland geography maps, right? But no encounter maps, no minis, nothing like that. It was all described, and I had a thoroughly enjoyable experience. Hooked me for life. But it wasn't until I moved and as an adult, so I reached out and started playing again, that I was introduced to playing with minis and a map and really dialing in that tactical experience of, and not wanting to say that Dungeons & Dragons is all about, encounters and battle and tactics and all that, but it can be a very significant part of it. Don't want to get away from the role play and all that, but you can play the whole game without having that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could 4th edition.
It's
very,
fourth?
very highly dependent on that kind of encounter mechanic, but 3rd you could, 5th you can. 1st and 2nd you definitely can. It was all my experiences 1st and 2nd edition were without those kinds of maps. But almost all pre-written modules, all those for the DM have maps that may or may not surface to the players. I thought it was very interesting in my experiences before using maps, trying to establish that, like I said, that shared kind of narrative, that shared immersion into your world. I'm trying to say it without saying shared hallucination, but it's almost what it is. Of you're all trying to imagine the same thing. Describing something, having 5 people playing, but they all imagine something slightly or wildly different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can't really anticipate or plan for how that might shake out.
And yet, strangely, every game of D&D I've played, there hasn't been an imagination of the world that's been so wildly different that it's caused issues. Well, I can't say that. There have been times when it's caused small issues, but it's rare.
Been times for me where I've had to clarify.
Yeah.
And then kind of do a course correction on somebody's imagination, which always feels very weird to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to tell somebody they imagine something wrong, but at the same time they imagine it wrong.
Right.
So.
Well, okay. I'm going to step back a little. Maps have been a part of my life forever. Some of the first memories I have are of traveling. I grew up traveling a lot because my dad worked in construction and he would go from job to job. I lived in 10 different locations by the time I was 10 years old, which meant a lot of driving from place to place. And my mom would hand me the map the Rand McNally's map, and I would follow along. For me, it seems like a very natural thing. If you want to describe a situation to somebody, you want to know where they are, where they're going, and those are like the first two things in my mind. Reading Tolkien, I love the fact that he describes situations almost always in relation to a map. Having an actual map in The Hobbit helps me as a reader understand the situation that's happening. And when I first read The Hobbit, I would flip back to the map all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's that same thing in D&D. As a DM, I have the maps to figure out the situation in order to communicate to the players the situation. As a player, I love being able to have a map to orient myself and constantly be aware of that's north, the ruins are over there, the road's over there, I'm in the middle of the forest. I got the Yawning Portal, which is a set of 6 or 7 dungeons, and there are maps in there. And those maps are meant for me, the DM. They're not meant for the players. The images of those maps have spoilers.
Yeah.
And so they can't be exposed to the players, or else it'll just ruin the experience. And I find that fascinating that there's a whole set of information that's just for the DM. And specifically maps. Theoretically, you could build maps that are just, here are the maps that the players should play on, and then have a bunch of notes in the background that say, by the way, there's a trap in this room, there's a secret passage here to there.
I've done this before. It's a little embarrassing where you're looking at it and you draw it and you just want to think of it. You start drawing the secret stuff on the map. Oh shit! You start erasing it. But ideally, you would have that documentation with yours, and you'd have a second set. It may not always be feasible, but I think it's very feasible and very reasonable that you'd have a second set and some kind of a digital distribution on a website or something that you can go and download and then print out or use separately as a reference. Distribute to your players like a handout. And so, there's a lot of different ways to kind of slice maps, the functionality, purpose, and all of that. One of them being DM versus player.
Yeah.
Right? For me, the main difference is functional versus kind of inspirational. A tactical map is there to kind of sync everybody up. Everybody knows what's going on. You're on the same page. And you can then plan accordingly, knowing that everybody has the same information. Right? Kind of a one source of truth as far as what the encounter is and the different dimensions. Again, very doable without it. But what it adds to, for me, what I think what it adds to an experience is it adds a little bit of immersion. It adds some engagement. But it adds mostly the big value add there is the cohesiveness of everybody's understanding.
True.
For that encounter. An overland map of, let's say, Forgotten Realms, right?
Yeah.
I used to have one. I had it framed.
Oh, really?
Edition, from the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms source book. It came with this fold-out map in the back, and yay big, and had all this information on it, and it was great, and I loved it, and it was nice to be able to look at that and again read a modules, reference some points, and say, oh wait, that's right here, that's how that works. But for me, those kinds of maps are inspirational. Sounds kind of corny, but I look at those and I immediately start to imagine what's going on here, what's happening here, how do these 2 points, these 2 towns relate to each other, right? Why is it that there's everything over here is populated and it's barren over here? Or you get to the edges and here be dragons. That immediately makes you start thinking about all the stuff that could be there, right? Like, it's a jumping off point, and it immediately it's a catalyst for imagination. For me, that's why I love maps. I think maps are great tactically, but for an overall experience of getting people to think about what is there.
Forgotten Realms has an established map, and you can go find that established map, and it has all of the towns that have been in stories and modules for decades.
You can find multiple versions of it with crazy amounts of detail.
Yeah. I think I have a version that on computer would be that big.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of like Africa in size. So often there will be places in modules or in games I've run that are not on the map. Like the first time I ran as a DM, I was like, I don't want to build my own world. I'll just use the existing Forgotten Realms world. But I don't want to use their cities. I'm going to put my own right there. And I'm going to put another one right there and change the map. And I think everybody probably does that. the Mines of Phandelver that you ran, Phandelver wasn't on the map. I don't think it was in a step, was it?
I think it was. I think I found other maps where you could find it.
Okay.
It depends on the map you're looking at. It depends on how detailed it is, and it depends on the content it's focusing on.
That's fair.
Because a lot of it will focus, like if you're looking at a map that's very centric to the Sword Coast, or is really focusing on the Moonshade books or any of the R.A. Salvatore books with Drizzt and all that, it's gonna focus on some very specific points of the geography, right? But like for the Mines of Phandelver, there were a couple towns I was absolutely convinced they were put there for that module and just made up on the spot. And I actually found 20-year-old maps that referred to those towns. I was blown away. There's so much content there.
There is
so much so that they can't use it all. And so just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not there. And so, but they have the option of just kind of, just reaching in the back pocket and pulling out, bam, I have all this stuff. It's like, well, there's no way you had that. You made it up. It's like, dude, it's been sitting there for 30 years now.
There's a book that is the Forgotten Realms Atlas. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Forgotten Realms Atlas, I want to say Marianne Winstead.
That sounds familiar.
She did the Forgotten Realms Atlas, the Dragonlance Atlas, and she actually did one for Middle Earth as well.
Oh, holy smokes.
And they're really cool because they're not just like there's sort of not atlases of locations. If you read through them, they're a brief overview of locations and broken up the regions, but they map out the journeys made by people from books.
Oh, okay.
So like the Middle Earth ones, maps out Lord of the Rings books and The Hobbit, and actually I'm assuming that I don't know that I haven't read that one. I've got it, but I haven't read it. But the Dragonlance ones and the Forgotten Realms ones, the Dragonlance one's very straightforward in that it goes through a lot of stuff that you read through in the main setting. But the Forgotten Realms one touches on the Moonshade books, the Drizzt books, some of the Spellfire books, and to have like those books that you read and you imagine in your head, and then have somebody else have actually gone through the trouble of making out these maps. Somebody who I believe was an actual legitimate cartographer.
Yeah.
Made these really cool maps and then mapped out like these little trail markers of like where they went and this was where they camped in this one book and all that, and then annotated like what everything meant. Those are very cool books to kind of sit there and read, especially if you've read those
I have read 2/3 of one of those books. When I was in middle school, I read, I think, the first of the Dragonlance books. And I got a little bit through it, and I was like, this is boring me to death. But I'm easily bored by books.
I read those, and that was it. I couldn't put them down. I burned through those as fast as I could.
There's a whole set of backstories and history that have been established by books and campaigns and more books and more campaigns, officially published things. Me as a DM, I didn't know most of that stuff. Like I said, I read 2/3 of one of the Dragonlance books. I played a bunch of gold box games in the early 90s that were all in Kryn, which was a completely different world than the Forgotten Realms. So the first time I sat down to be a DM, I'd been exposed to a couple of video games that were in Forgotten Realms. It was like, I'll pick some locations that are near the places I remember.
Right.
That was it. But I'm not beholden as a DM to keep up that.
Absolutely not.
The
consistency
of that.
That's an incredibly valuable
narrative
lesson that
I
I
accidentally fell into.
Right. I felt this obligation. We talked about a couple episodes ago about not wanting to create content for your DM as a player because you feel like you're then modifying their world. Running a game in the Forgotten Realms, like, well, Ed Greenwood did it a certain way, so I'm not going to do it because this is his work. No,
Right.
It's my game.
Right.
I'm leveraging his content. That's great, and he did a great job of building a world. But I'm the one playing it and running it for my players, and I will apologize profusely for modifying it if he happens to show up at my game.
Right.
On the off chance that happens, I order pizza, and he's the one who brings it to the door. Otherwise, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, right? I'm the one running it. What's important is we have fun, and I'm pretty sure that he's not going to take offense, right? It's the whole point of that.
I think if I had run a game in Middle Earth, I would have felt very obligated to get everything right because I know that world significantly better than I know Forgotten Realms. But my first time as a DM, I was just like, I don't know, there are orcs and goblins and shit. Let's have a game.
And when you can just get to the point where you're comfortable being like, orcs, goblins, and shit, go. and let's let go of all of the other apprehensions. I gotta get this perfect, or I need to do that just right, or people are gonna know that this isn't how it went. Well, no shit, it's not how it went. We're playing a game in a fictional universe. It goes however you say it goes. None of it's going to be historically accurate. We're here to have fun, exercise our imaginations, and interact. It's not homework.
I think the first time I was exposed to D&D, or the early times when I was exposed to D&D, I saw the amount of work that whoever had put together the content had put into it, and it made it intimidating.
It intimidates me to this day. Terribly.
But for some reason, a year and a half ago when I decided, I'm going to DM, that was the least intimidating thing to me. The most intimidating thing to me was, oh God, are people going to have fun?
Yeah.
Are people going to show up for the second session? Or are we going to build characters and they're going to be like, oh God, I hate you now?
But you started running a game, and you had to start turning people away at the door. So many people were trying to get into that game.
Yeah, and that worked out. But that has nothing to do with maps.
It's okay. That's okay.
On the subject of maps.
Yes.
Battle mats. I had not seen a battle mat until you started running Fandelver. So a battle mat, for anybody who hasn't seen one, is just a vinyl mat with a grid on it. That's it. Usually one side is squares and one side is hexes, because some people like to play hexes. I ran into somebody at a game store once who actually worked on the California Raisins. Like, he got into painting minis so much that he made a career of it and was painting claymation as his profession, which is the guy who invented the California Raisins and ran that used to have a studio outside of Portland. This guy talked about having no map when he would play with his dad and his brothers. And then he got a little bit older, and they were like getting in fights about who was standing where. And that's when they finally broke down and got a battle mat. And he started getting minis, and he started painting minis, obviously. And that was like a big leap forward for him. And was it the same for you?
It changed the game fundamentally for me. I enjoyed the storytelling aspect of it, of the encounters. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of, it felt like playing fast and loose with the rules, and that as soon as you got into third with reach, flanking bonuses, attacks of opportunity, 5 foot steps versus a full move, and things like that, you can't enforce that without a map.
Or you can, but you'd have to remember, the DM would have to be very good at describing.
You can if you're one of those people who can play chess in your head.
Right.
I am not one of those people, right?
I can half do that, but I wouldn't. I don't want to try. I don't want to waste my effort on that.
I can't keep a grocery list in my head.
And you don't have to. We have paper and we have phones.
It is a different game. It's a different way of playing it. It's the same game. It's a different way of experiencing it, I guess. I think both are incredibly fun. One is a lot more convenient if you don't have a lot of space. One is a lot more convenient if you have the space and you have the resources, right? Minis, it's really hard to have this topic without starting to really get into minis, which we're not going to do because we wanted to have that topic. But you don't have to have minis. You have bottle caps and coins. Like, I've
heard people use M&Ms or Skittles for enemies. So
right.
So if you kill one, you get to eat it.
If you're not, wouldn't work for me because I would just eat everything without thinking about it.
So when there's a battle mat, usually it's a wet erase mat. Mm-hmm. Though I've seen people just put plexiglass down over like a pre-printed map.
When I was still living on my own, didn't have a whole lot of money, but foolishly Home Depot issued me a Home Depot credit card. I got it in my head that I was going to build a game table.
Oh, okay.
And if you can Google game tables, they're beautiful, pieces of furniture, gorgeous, well crafted, all that. This is not what I made.
Oh, you actually made something?
Oh, what I made was I got a fold-out utility table. Wasn't a lot of credit limit on this credit card, it's folded in half. You fold it out, lock it, right? It's plastic. I took a ruler and I just did a grid across the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then I got this plexi glass material from there. Sanded it. I cut it with a Dremel so it went over the grid, and then I screwed it down into the table so it didn't move.
Okay.
So you could draw on the plexiglass all you wanted, right? But the grid was always there, and then you could just wipe it down, and everything would be fine. And
Sounds like
you fold it down and you put it away, and it
both
saves
great
space
and horrible idea.
so it was great as long as you didn't move it around too much. So it's those one of those kind of plastic, high density plastic utility tables.
Yeah.
But it's all hollow on the inside.
Yep.
So there was like maybe an eighth of an inch of actual plastic for the screws to bite into. So the screws would pop out, and then you have the plexiglass all over the place. And it wasn't super durable, right?
Right.
I took it to places when we would go somewhere else and play, and then you fold it out. It worked really well for what it was and how little it cost me.
But the battle mat.
The battle mat is really tried and true. I'd love to take credit for the battle mats. They've been around forever. I keep them in my trunk. There's no reason to put it inside because you're always going to need one. It takes up almost no space.
Yeah.
You put it in one of those folio tubes, and it's always just ready to go.
Mine's in a stainless steel fishing rod tube.
And you shove some markers in there with the tube with the mat.
Oh, yeah.
And you're ready.
With a battle mat, normally you don't roll it out and have the map already drawn.
No. You might have the map from the last game. Still
Accidentally.
which isn't great.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah. If you leave something on one of those mats.
It'll stain your map.
Yeah. I really love maps, and I want to do them right. And when I'm in the middle of a game and I need to draw something, I'm not going to draw it with the detail that I would want to draw it. So I always battle between, am I going to just bring the mat, bring the battle mat and draw it during the game, or am I going to pre-draw something and bring it? More often than not, it's just impractical, either mechanically in the game or with my time to pre-draw a bunch of stuff. But I love pre-drawing because then it's very detailed. It's far more immersive than this square, which is not really a square because I just drew it in like a tenth of a second. That's a house, and here's another house, and here's a tree, and I'm drawing as fast as I can to get the drawing over with so we can start playing. And more often than not, I don't like that trade-off of having to draw during the game.
I've done both. I actually got these, which I thought was an amazing idea, and I never used them. It just didn't turn out to work out well. These like jigsaw pieces
I've seen those.
that are
I haven't tried them.
wet erase that you can pre-draw everything on, but then you just lay them out as you explore things, right? One of the main drawbacks to pre-drawing things is, ironically enough, that it's pre-drawn.
Right.
And so, if, you immediately get a scope of what's involved, like if you have a dungeon, as opposed to if you draw as you go, players don't really, like this could be 3 rooms, this could be, a 4 battle mat dungeon, like they don't know, right?
Yeah.
If you just roll it out there and everything's already drawn, even if it's not filled in, they immediately know kind of the scope of what's going on here, right?
The alternative that I came up with was the idea of I pre-drew just individual rooms. Now, in this particular campaign, it was a fortress, a magical fortress where the rooms move around. So part of the function of these pre-drawn rooms was I could put one down, you could explore it, you could go through a door, and then that room you just left disappears and a different one shows up behind you. I went and bought big pieces of kind of butcher paper that have grids on them, and then I drew rooms and I laminated them so I can draw on them. It's a lot of effort, but it means in the moment of the game when you guys walk through a door, I just pull out a room and I put it down and you're in the room.
But that's very well lent itself to the specific mechanic of that location as well.
It did.
I don't think you could have done that location any other way.
No, that would have been insane to do it otherwise.
You have to redraw it constantly, right?
Yeah. But I'm not sure that would work for every dungeon, because some dungeons you're going to walk into a room and the DM's just going to draw half of it because you can only see halfway through the room.
I've struggled with that a lot. Because I got the jigsaw pieces because I was like, I want to pre-draw things. I don't want to give everything away, but I don't want to draw on the spot because like you, I'm a perfectionist. Unlike you, I can't draw for the life of me. Like, you can just.
I can.
Your maps are fantastic, and I can barely draw a straight line. The squares help on the battle map.
Right.
Squares help a lot. It's amazing. you can do it terribly and it still comes out pretty well. The finished product still looks like a map, right? It doesn't need to look perfect. It's not poured concrete, right? So it wouldn't, like, your walls wouldn't have been perfectly straight, you know, in the setting anyway. But it looks like a hand-drawn map, which amazingly lends itself to that experience even more.
That's true.
You know?
That's true.
It's not like a printed, you know, drafted architectural AutoCAD thing. It looks like somebody hand drew that map.
You kind of have to accept in D&D that everything you're doing is a representation of the imagination of what you want to imagine. The map being imperfect, that's fine. The miniatures being imperfect, that's fine. So long as everybody's has a shared enough experience. I will probably lean toward pre-drawn as often as I possibly can because I want to speed up. I want to reduce the amount of time that people are waiting around for me as a DM.
In my experience, that little break, that 5-minute break of going out and a smoke break, grab a snack, go in the bathroom, lets me draw what I need to draw.
That's true.
And then when people come back, they're a little more focused because they've kind of, you know, they got to stretch their legs. They got to, you know, if Savannah's sitting there with her e-cig for an hour, she wants a break. She wants 5 minutes. And
that's fair.
If we don't break, that's what she's going to be thinking about, not the encounter and all that, right?
Yeah.
You know? So she's going to go out and then come back and be refocused again, right? Re-energized, full of nicotine, essentially.
Right. I watch Critical Role periodically. They do very few breaks. They do like one break in a 3-hour session. And Matt Mercer does a shit job of drawing. Like, he is one of the worst map drawers I've ever seen. Like, he has all the time he needs beforehand, usually, to pre-draw stuff. And he'll just bring out a piece of butcher paper with squiggles on it that I can just barely make out.
Oh, that's another thing, too. If you do like to pre-draw it, and you don't want to draw on your battle mat and stain it, etc., you can get big pieces of gridded butcher paper. So that is an option, too.
It is.
I had a friend who had one, and they're moving. Like, do you want this? It's like, yes, I will use the crap out of that.
They're cheap.
Never once used it.
That's what I use to make the
Laminate tiles?
Yeah, the laminated fortress tiles. Mm-hmm. The next campaign I'm running, I'm thinking I will probably use that because it's a dungeon that you probably go in and out of constantly. I don't want to have to redraw the entire thing.
Yeah.
I can just draw it and still have it for the next game.
And also, there will be locations that you want to have a map for that don't necessarily need to have a mystery.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you want to have a map for a town,
or a tavern that
there shouldn't be a fog of war for a town,
right?
Unless like things are really going to go south really quick, like or a tavern is a great example, right? It's something where it's perfectly appropriate for you to walk in and immediately have an idea what the scope of what you're doing is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The times when it is appropriate, tavern, town, things like that, it's also, there's a correlation of you're more likely to revisit that place.
That's
so
true.
It's nice to have that. You can just, you know, break out over and over and over again.
I was reading an old module, it was the original Sunless Citadel module, and they have an image of the town, but they don't have what I would call a map of the town.
A key or?
It's like a perspective drawing of
yes.
the town, and it points out, you know, here's the town hall, here's the tavern, here's the blacksmith, but it's like a look down the street, and you can see all the buildings. Because it doesn't need to be a tactical map. There's not going to be any battles. You don't really need to know who's where in the city at any one time. So it just being you called it an inspirational image, it gives whoever's looking at that just an idea of the setting.
I remember hearing something, I don't know if it's a quote or not, but I thought it was really interesting. It resonated with me. It made me feel really bad for artists, actually. The idea that the less you understand of an artist's work, the more you can appreciate it. Everybody knows Van Gogh's Starry Night is a big one for me. I look at that and I just start imagining people living in those little houses, all those little lights, you know, in that town, like what's happening there? Is there somebody getting mugged in an alleyway, you know, or drinking too much in a tavern? I look at that, and that is just a prime example of gaming inspiration to me, right? Another one is Fantasia.
Yeah.
Is it the Night on Demon Mountain or something like that?
Night on Bald Mountain.
Okay. The music
Oh, that is
the artistry or the imagery of coming up from the mountain and then there's that town underneath like resonates the exact same way Starry Night does. But it's just a gaming gold mine of like you could just start pulling stories out of that left and right to run a game off of. But I didn't draw those. I didn't animate those.
It's true.
The idea being that the less you understand of what's involved in somebody's art, the more you can appreciate it. If I had drawn Starry Night, I wouldn't look at a light or one of those little golden blobs and say, that's somebody's house. They're settling in, they're having dinner, blissfully unaware of an orc raid coming into town, right? I'd be like, this was the color of paint that I used on this kind of canvas. It would be very mechanical.
Yes.
I would know what was involved. I would know the workings underneath. It would be math almost, like just the component parts.
Yeah.
And not the sum.
I have experienced that from the artist's point of view. I've used to be a musician. I guess I still play instruments.
You still play instruments.
I still play.
He does our intro music.
But the stuff that I was really passionate about that I did musically, it's the same thing. When I listen to music that I've recorded, I hear the decision making that I made. I hear instrument I made, the mixing choices I made, the room I was in. I hear the mechanics of how it happened, and I don't hear the story behind it or the things that it inspires me to think of when it hopefully evokes some sort of emotion. It doesn't evoke emotions in me because it's a mechanical experience for me as a musician.
The more holes there are for you to fill in with your imagination, the more it engages you, right? Van Gogh knows there's not a family behind that light, right? He knows there's canvas behind that. But I look at it, I don't think about what was involved in painting it. I don't think about the mechanics. I think about the journey it takes me on, right? So that Summerlin Citadel, that map of that town, it shows you 4 or 5 points, right? But you can see a picture of the town. So you see those houses that aren't labeled, and your brain automatically starts thinking of like, well, who lives there? Is that a family? You just start filling in these gaps, and your imagination takes over, and they could absolutely map everything out and define everything for you, which would immediately take away some of that experience, right?
Which actually, that comes back to the whole big map of Faerun, the Forgotten Realms world. When I look at it, I think, well, between Baldur's Gate and whatever the place is south of Baldur's Gate, there's got to be like outposts, things happening between here and here, and there's a mountain range here. How many caves are there? How many tunnels? How many dwarven mines? Trade
caravans.
Yeah, it's
kinds of things.
I feel like there's a quote somewhere in there. The interesting things on a map are the things between the dots. You know what's happening in those cities. You don't know what's happening between the cities.
But I think that's the absolute true value of those bigger maps, of some of the art in there, right? And even those smaller maps, like you said, of that town, like there's value in not mapping everything out. When everything is defined and everything's determined, it's just a story.
Yeah.
It's not interactive anymore, right? Part of the experience is filling in those gaps, either with your imagination, something that unsaid, or filling in parts of the story with how it unfolds with the party's actions, right? Like, there have to be voids that you can fill for it to be fun, right? Or you could just go see a movie.
Right.
The interactive part of it is filling in those gaps and making it your own, which is what I love about maps, about the game overall. And even when I'm creating my character, I'll spend hours creating a character. That whole character is just math. It's a representation. Yeah. It's a result of a bunch of math, a bunch of concepts put together. But I'm thinking of a backstory. I'm thinking of why do they know this? Why do they have these abilities? Why don't they have those abilities?
When you're building a character, you are trying to fill the gaps with consistency.
Okay. Yeah.
When you look at a Starry Night, you're trying to fill the gaps in your knowledge with consistent, interesting stories. And when you look at that map of the town Oakhurst in Sunless Citadel, you're thinking, I bet there are people consistent with what I see, but more depth than is there. And if something happens that runs against the grain of that consistency, it's going to take you out of the experience pretty fast.
Yes.
Whether it's you're walking across what looks like a blank part of the map, and the DM says, you come across a giant castle that's in the middle of the road. Well, no, I can't. Otherwise, it would be on the map.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I guess that would be an interesting mystery. Why is there a giant castle? That's an inconsistency that could be an interesting story. But for the most part, inconsistencies, they rub against the grain, and you want to investigate them.
If you were going down a trail, frequented by some trade caravans, you're on your horse, there's a wagon, you're seeing some other traders, some other merchants, and then up comes a Chevy Suburban. You're done.
Right.
You're done.
Well,
right?
and
there's a scene in Braveheart where Mel Gibson is leading the charge, as William Wallace, bunch of horses, painted up, swords, just very in the moment. And in the background, you can see a car drive by on the road. I'm not shitting you. Blatant white cars drives by in the background. And they didn't catch it. Went into the movie. You get the DVD now. You can see that scene. You see a car drive by in the background of that scene.
I've seen the movie multiple times, and I've never noticed that.
But now I know it's there. That scene is just completely ruined for me, right?
Right.
You can't believe that.
No, you
Look, it's William Wallace. No, it's Mel Gibson LARPing because there's a car in the background. It's his mom picking him up after the RPG. It's a completely different experience at that point, right? Like if you see a movie that you love, like let's say like a Harry Potter movie or something like that, something that's very fantastic, and then you see how they do the effects, it for me ruins those scenes. I won't watch them.
One of my ex-bosses, he had kids, and his wife would not let his children watch behind the scenes because it ruins the movies for him.
And why would you want to? Because your kids see that, and it's magic to them, right?
Yeah.
It's magic to adults. Let's just be honest. Like you see it, and you get that wonderment, that imagination, and that is as close as we're ever going to get to magic, right? Like it's something that defies explanation or definition.
That kind of hits on something huge, which is storytelling is the closest we can get to magic. Mm-hmm. And whether it's through a movie or a book or a shared narrative like D&D, that's the closest we're going to get to a magical experience. It's kind of sappy, but...
And to just be literal about it, like when I was a kid, my mom took me to the Holt Center in Eugene, and we saw Magician. I forget who it was, by David Copperfield or something.
Oh, right.
And there was this whole 2-hour thing of just magic tricks, right? Magic, but presented in a way, took you on a journey, had a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Personally, I love the entire, premise of a magic trick. I'm telling you in this moment, I'm going to lie to you. I'm lying to you right now, probably, right? Like in the way that I'm moving, my actions, all that. And yet I'm still going to get you to trust me. Because if you don't trust me, I can't trick you.
Then
right?
you must hate Penn and Teller.
I love Penn and Teller.
Oh, really?
I do.
They all, like almost every one of their shows, they do the behind the scenes.
Well, I don't watch it.
Okay.
The worst, most violent thing that you can do to me in that moment is tell me how it's done. I don't want to know how it's done.
And
I want to wonder.
If you go see Penn and Teller, that's exactly what they do.
Right.
They'll do the whole trick. They'll like turn the entire stage around, and you get to watch it from the back.
Right. and it's a lot of times it's perspective or misdirection and all that, but you just let me wonder. I mean, let me fill in the gaps on my own, and maybe I'll figure it out. I think I figure it out, but
I'm clearly a different person than you, because when I watch a magic trip, my brain just immediately tries to figure it out.
Oh, mine too.
Oh, okay.
Mine too. And there are some that I can figure out, and those are the ones I don't really enjoy.
That's
fair. The ones where I can't figure it out, those are the ones I love.
Drive me nuts.
I love them.
No, those are the ones that I'm like, oh,
I'll
have to figure this out.
Right? But the second you tell me how it's done, it blews my brain. I couldn't care less.
Well, that's true. That's true.
It's a closed book experience. It's no longer a mystery. It's no longer has value to me.
Yep. The vast majority of Chris Angel's stuff, for whatever reason, I already knew most of his tricks before I saw them. So when I saw his stuff, I was like, oh, whatever.
I can't get past the fact that he looks like a complete asshole.
Somehow this has something to do with maps.
Maps. Well, yeah, I mean, fill in the voids, that wonder and imagination of what is there.
Which actually kind of touches on the fact that maps serve very different functions. You brought this up at the very beginning. A tactical map should have no wonderment in it. It should be very straightforward and open.
Well, it can.
It can.
But that's not its purpose.
No, yeah, its
purpose is to have alignment.
Yeah.
So everybody's on the same page, right?
Everybody knows what's happening. This person's here, this monster's there, this other person's here. That's it. When I'm a DM, I think of maps in 3 stages. One is world map, where I'm going to show you this is a city and it's just a dot on the map, and here's another city, it's a dot on the map, and there are lines between dots on the map. The next stage down is the city size, and it's going to have a city and it's going to have buildings. You're going to be able to see most of the buildings from a top view, as if somebody had drawn a picture of, or the closest thing they got to what that city looks like. And then the next stage down is tactical. I very much think of it as those three levels. And if there's wonderment at the world level, that's great. There should be. If there's wonderment at the city level, that's good too, because that city should be dark alleys and people's offices and people, lots of people living their lives. At the tactical level, it should be, exactly what's going on right at this moment in this place, because that's the purpose of that map. Usually, you've rolled initiative by that point. We're talking about 6-second increments of time on a very well-known, well-established grid. And it's a little bit jarring just that D&D does that. It goes from grand sweeping vistas of people traveling for days and days to suddenly we're talking about 6 seconds.
But like a good map, a good story, all of that, it shouldn't be limited to mystifying and sparking the imagination of its players, because it should spark the imagination of the person running the game too. Give them ideas on how to flesh out the story. Give them ideas for the next game. Give them ideas to how to tweak an encounter. It's very easy to fall into things being mechanical when you run a game.
Yeah.
Which is not the wrong way to do it, because I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it, but it's unfortunate. It can be much more difficult to stay engaged, interested, and be imaginative and have that sense of wonderment when you run a game, because you know so many of the ins and outs and the details that the players don't know.
Yeah.
But if you can maintain that, you can go a lot longer without burning out. You can maintain that for your players a lot longer. You can get a lot more enjoyment out of it as a DM. I'm not going to say it's common, but it can be very easy to get to the point where you just feel like you don't get to play.
Right.
You're not playing, you're running the game, right?
I'm just the computer who's making sure that the rules are being followed.
If you can run a game and still maintain that experience, like it feels like you're playing the game too, you're going to have a lot more fun, your players will have more fun, and you'll get a lot more out of it.
The next game that I'm going to run is going to be just a small set of people, and it's going to be a pre-existing campaign. I'm going to run Son of the Citadel. And I've never done that before. I've never run a pre-existing one. I'm a little bit worried that it'll get mechanical for me, because some of the wonderment that I get out of doing D&D is making up stories, making up all sorts of stuff. And this is like a 20 or 30 page module where it's all written out for me already. I don't have to do anything to run the game. Whereas when I ran the Flex group, I drew maps. I drew a map of a city that didn't exist before, and in the drawing of that map, I had to think about, well, who lives here and who lives here, and why is this part of the city like this, and this part of the city is like this, and this river flows through it, so they must have either trade routes on the river, or they've got fishing going on or something. And what happens outside the walls? Well, maybe there's farmland, because usually it's an agrarian society that builds something a little more structured. So it's a farming community that grew up, and now it's this. And so I had to go through the thought process of being very creative about how that city came to be, why it's there, who lives there now, what the political structure is, what are the functions that every city needs. Food and water, shelter, people to maintain those things. It needs a government, it needs guards and places of worship, it needs workers that work in all of the places. That experience of creating a city, and it's really just a bunch of scribbles on a piece of paper, but but creating that city in my mind meant that I had to go through the arc of society and think through everything that happens in society. When you think through it all, at least for me as a DM, it gets me really engaged with the game, and it gets me really connected with the characters and the world, so that when the game happens, I can speak with authority about what's going on in that particular location. I'm worried that running a pre-written campaign, I won't be as engaged, I won't be as connected to the world.
Doing that for a city is exciting. It's fun. For all the reasons that you mentioned, it's also incredibly intimidating.
Yeah, it can be.
You can get in there in 20 minutes and you're like, oh, I can't do this. You just walk away from it, right? You don't have to flesh out every part of a town. Every act of it is,
a little black box can just be a little black box for now.
And then when somebody wants to investigate that, then you can figure out what that means, what that is in the moment. Maps can inspire, I think, both sides of the DM screen, right? Like, going back to the idea of a shared hallucination. What's more unpredictable or fluid than somebody's imagination, right? I mean, and to be able to galvanize that at a table, so 6 people are imagining the same thing, it's pretty special. I mean, it's pretty powerful. It's not easy to do, and yet sometimes it's not that difficult to do either. You can do it without even thinking about it.
I'm surprised at how easy it seems. Now, I could be delusional as a DM, and I could be walking into the room saying X, having everybody perceive it as Y, and I just keep going, assuming X, and people have to change their assumptions after the fact. I don't know. That probably happens all the time.
Coming back to those, filling in those blanks, those gaps, it's important to leave those there so people can fill them in with their own imagination, but if what you imagine and what I imagine is far enough apart, it can introduce a difficulty or a problem.
Yeah.
Or just a misunderstanding that where you think something's going to happen that it isn't, It's one thing that I have a problem with a pre-written adventure, is that when I put something together and I imagine it in my head and I describe it to you, I know what I'm describing, and so then you can ask me questions about it, and because I've already built it out in my head, I can just on the fly immediately answer your questions. I have had something occur multiple times when a pre-done adventure where it has boxed flavor text, and I'll just read it out. But I'm one of those people, I can't take notes and listen at the same time. I can read and imagine something.
Oh, okay.
But I can't read and speak it out loud. And think about the cadence of my voice. What tone am I using? Am I enunciating clearly? Are you paying attention? Am I making eye contact so that I'm engaging you while I tell you this? I can do all of that and read it off to you, but then I'm not imagining it. And so then you'll stop and say, well, what about this? I'm like, what are you talking about? You just described this to me. There's a red, whatever, curtain in a room. You just described it to me. I want to say something behind it. I don't remember describing a red curtain. 20 seconds ago, those words came out of my mouth. I have no recollection of it. I haven't built that out in my head, so I can't answer those questions, right?
I have 2 potential problems. One is you have a pre-written campaign and you read something out, and something's inconsistent in what you read versus something else that's happened in the game. Or you're making stuff up with the intent of kind of adding some flavor, even though it's pre-written, and then you read something that completely contradicts your imagination.
Or a tweak that you did to the story, right? Or something that just happens. Like, let's say you've got
okay, now I'm scared.
A resolution to a story. Let's say it's an adventure module, right? And somebody comes out, let's say the king comes, and you're just reading and presents you all with medals and gives you a reward. And you read the whole thing. And you're like, I thought the king was assassinated, like, last game. Like, fuck, that didn't happen. I didn't think about it, and I just blindly read you some text.
Right.
I'm on autopilot, and I cheated you of your experience because I wasn't paying attention to what I was reading.
Right.
You want to be able to make changes, but depending on how that adventure is written out, it may not accommodate those changes, and you want to be aware of that, and you may need to do some, vetting of your content to make sure it's still in line with your changes, especially if you have drastic changes.
I feel like I'm going to have to read through this module like 3 or 4 times all the way through before I'm comfortable making changes. And I may not. I may just run it clean.
What I've done that has worked for me, and everybody does it differently, but is I will read through that content beforehand, and I'm not looking to memorize it because I'm not going to use it. I'm reading through it to build it in my head, and then reconcile that with the world if making changes, and then what I end up with in my head, I will just reference that when I describe something, right? So I've built something out from the template in that flavor text, apply any changes that may be appropriate to it or relevant, kind of cement that into my understanding of the way this dungeon works or the way this town works or the way this NPC should be behaving, and then go off of that.
Right.
Instead of going off what's written there.
Otherwise, you could be in the middle of the game looking at your notes and be like, that is not what I have in my head.
Mm-hmm. Or if it's completely mechanical to you.
Yeah.
A lot of times what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish relationships between different NPCs, different events, motive, things like that. And if you just go by exactly what's written there, and you're trying to memorize an entire starter adventure, which could be huge, you may not make those connections in your own head. You may be describing connections that your players make that you're oblivious to, because you're not even listening to your own content, right? And so they're like, oh, well, that means this. You're like, does? Why is that? I've been there where I've had players explain to me the ramifications of what I just read, completely lost on me because I was just going through the motions. I'm like, oh shit, is that really what that means?
Which
loses all credibility for your players. Because you can't do it without it being blatantly obvious. You didn't know what the fuck you were talking about. At least for me, it was obvious I didn't know what I was talking about. My players knew more about the plot than I did at that point, and that I was no longer running the game. I no longer had the credibility to run the game.
It's okay for your players to be... I don't know. I think it's okay for your players to be a step ahead of you. But
it's not. The problem isn't being a step ahead of you. It's... You do a lot of work to get your players engaged, and if they get the idea that you're not engaged,
there you go.
You lose that balance.
Yeah.
And then how are they going to believe a story or a world that you're trying to immerse them in if you don't believe it? Right? It's like somebody trying to sell you something, and it's obvious they don't believe in what they're trying to sell you. If somebody comes up to you and goes like, "Hey, do you have time to talk about?" Saving the rainforest, no, you're already 3-4 steps past them, right? They have no interest in being there. You're interested in talking to them.
Okay.
I don't know how we talk about this stuff so much. It astonishes me.
So I think the reason we talk forever is because of the tangents part of the Dungeons and Tangents.
But also because we enjoy it.
Well, that's fair.
Back to that point of it's something that I don't want to say we believe in because that's something like a little cultish, but it's something that we enjoy. We honestly enjoy it. We appreciate the value of the game. If we were somebody who just wanted to sell books in a store, we wouldn't be able to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have that passion for it. We wouldn't enjoy it. And I think it would become very obvious. The fact that we're doing this podcast, I don't know that anybody actually watches this. Right. Other people that we say, hey, watch this, and force video links down the chat window of listen, watch this. But we still do it. We enjoy it. We spend a couple of hours on it.
Yeah. And then I spend a couple hours
editing. You put
editing.
a lot of work into it. I shouldn't even be talking. I just show up and just kind of ramble on. Erik puts a bunch of work into this.
You should put an extra hour every week into marketing it. I don't know how marketing works.
It's probably better that I don't. That probably do more harm than good.
There's no bad press.
It just goes back to that point of when you are really engaged in something, it shows, and when you're not, and you can't hide that well, it also shows, and it has a very detrimental effect.
Both in running a podcast and running a game.
Right. Which I think is a big part why we can talk about it so much. It's because we enjoy it. And we do it for us. We don't do it for any other motivation. Right?
Yeah.
We do it because we enjoy doing it.
So, as always, if you're listening to this, you're insane, and you should subscribe because your insanity needs more fodder.
There you go. Sure.
If you are our troll, please comment. If you're not our troll,
If you're watching, please comment.
yes.
And just let us know. If you're Chris Angel, I'm very sorry.
If you're Chris Rutledge, I'm sorry that you're Chris Rutledge.
Hi, Chris. We love you.
Oh, right, and next episode will almost certainly be minis that we have.
Yes, most probably.
Much like dice, I love minis. I think they're great, and I probably have an unhealthy obsession with them. So I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
I have more than I've ever used.
I have a bunch I probably will never use, and I knew that when I got them. But it was like, how could I not have a samurai mouse? If you're gonna make a mini of a samurai mouse, I'm going to buy that mini every time. Yeah.
All right, before we start having...
Before we have that episode, yeah.
before we delve into another